Thanks for letting me join, and I so enjoyed the presentations from last week and again this week. Lots of familiar thematics. Indeed, would like to just take a couple of minutes and maybe share a few thoughts from our perspective at CSmart, but maybe first just to orient who we are. This is what we look like in downtown Elmira Port, where we have actually a very, very impressive center. As you can see on the left top, we have a training center, state-of-the-art simulation training center. And on the right, of course, a self-contained hotel of 176 rooms. And what we do is we provide training for Carnival Corporation, which you'll be aware is made up of 9 different operating lines around the world. And so we work on a business model that every week we fill that hotel with about 175 students who will spend a week with us doing simulation training, be it bridge or engineering or environmental. And then at the end of the week, they will leave, we'll clean the hotel and set up and do it again week over week. And so as we were heading into 2019, we were looking forward to a record year. We were anticipating upwards of 8,000 participants to flow through the center during the course of the year. But then reality hit, and like many of you, we entered into the pandemic journey, as I describe it. And so this will look familiar to many. In the early days, back in January to March of last year, as we were all hearing about Corona for the first time and realizing it was no longer a beer, we had to make adjustments, obviously, on site to make ourselves COVID safe. For on-site training, and that lasted into March. And then as you can see, we then ceased our on-site training, and regrettably at the same time, I had to pause our support from a number of contractors and consultants who assisted us in delivering training. Of course, we had to shut down the hotel and put it into a warm standby, and very sadly had to move through a 60% workforce adjustment as well. So my team were not only dealing with the uncertainty of Corona, but layered on top of that was a very emotional workforce reduction. We moved through that, and at the same time, of course, quickly pivoted to an online delivery program. And of course, our student base is global, so we had to figure that out pretty quickly. And also doing it from a work from home environment. So within a brief period of time, we had our instructors learning how to deliver curriculum in a different way from a new environment. So we routinely now have instructors delivering programs from their homes to participants that are sitting on the other end in their living room, absorbing the training. And now, like many of you, we are continuing on in that state, but starting to anticipate the next steps as we see a bit of a light at the end of the tunnel. And that's quickly where I'd like to get to in the presentation. It's not so much about how we weathered the storm, but what we're thinking about in the next bounds. But in terms of enablers for our success so far, and we think we have been, like all of you, relatively successful, but certainly have learned a lot through the journey. I don't think any of this will come as a surprise. First and foremost, from the beginning, my thematic was communicate, communicate, communicate. And when you think you've communicated enough, you've only just started communicating, so communicate more. And so we leverage many of the techniques that we heard about both in last week's presentation and again this week. At the beginning of this, for about a 4-month period, I was personally communicating every day with the entire workforce directly to keep them up to date on what was going on. And we continue that forward. I meet personally online with the team at least once a week. And as we just heard Chris mention, certainly those periodic press updates from the government and other things were critical, but also keeping the entire team up to date with what was happening across the entire Carnival Corporation was key. And also making sure that that communication was always two-way, so setting the conditions where everyone felt comfortable to raise any concern up, and that we were responsive within 24 hours to any issue that was raised. Key for me, and I've learned an awful lot as a Canadian coming into the Netherlands, the important role of the Works Council, and that was critical for our success. Worked very closely day in, day out with the chair of the Works Council and the rest of the Works Council team to make sure that we were absolutely joined at the hip, if you will, to use a Canadian phrase, that we were completely aligned in terms of our messaging to the workforce, and an ongoing conversation between myself personally and the chair of the Works Council to make sure we were talking through every issue, every step of the way, to make sure that the workforce were getting what they needed. I think number 3, we've heard talked about a lot. I would just touch on the 4th bullet. I mentioned this, I think, last week, but important for me as well was bringing in external agencies to provide confirmation that we were getting it right, if you will, from a training center perspective. And I think on that, key for me was, you may have caught in the first slide that we do have an on-site wellness clinic, and we actually engaged very closely with our doctors, who were Dutch doctors, who were able to advise me and the rest of the team all the way through the initial stages. And then as we established our internal protocols, we brought in an independent RI&E, so an investigation inspection agency, to look at our protocols and confirm that they were satisfactory. And indeed, that gave confidence to the Works Council and the workforce that we were doing everything we could to look after both the physical and emotional well-being of the team. Fun activities, as we've heard mentioned a few times, we did a lot of that, and we continue to try and do that. But also key for me was acknowledging with the team up front that every employee and every family were living their own journey. So to be careful not to try and have one size fit all, that with the leadership team and the Works Council to understand and be sensitive to the unique needs of every member of the team. And so those were a few tricks that we found very, very helpful. Rounding it out and sensitive to time, really for me, now it's about looking ahead. As we've heard, you know, the weather's changing. We're seeing some positive indicators, but I'm dealing now and working hard with the team to realize that the return to normal will not be normal. The workforce have largely been away from the training facility now for almost a year. Things are different. They've lived their own journeys. That's had an impact on them. So thinking through how we will return back into the environment is key. We're seeing lots of conversations around vaccine and testing. What will that mean? How will we, you know, come at it both from the science perspective, the personal emotion perspective, and the law perspective, and how will that impact our operations forward? That will be important for us. Flexible work arrangements, we've heard some comments on that. How will we reboard our employees? Because again, they've been away from the office, they've worked in a different way, the interpersonal relationships are different, and there will be a new set of stressors when all of a sudden people again have to start getting in their vehicles, drive to work day in and day out in very close proximity with their coworkers, something they haven't done for quite some time. So I'm curious to explore that with the team to find out what are the new set of stressors that are going to make themselves apparent in that transition period and the period after. Building on the positives, certainly from our perspective, we have learned a lot very quickly about how to deliver online curriculum, how to use our simulation remotely, how to deliver different types of training. And so we need to capture that and build on it moving forward. And then I think from a housekeeping perspective, we all have business continuity plans. We've actually had to execute and use the business continuity plans. So making sure we capture the lessons that we've learned through this year and document it so that we have actually achieved the learning and are ready for the next pandemic that will come at some point in the future. And then finally, to round out, I think important for us will be celebrating the journey. We've all just lived individually and collectively as a team a very difficult year and a half, 2 years, depending on how it goes. And as we come out the back end of that, using that as a launching pad to take the organization to the next level by celebrating the success, capturing the learning, and moving forward, I think are key. And so I think, Sandra, with that, I'll stop and I would welcome any comments or questions that anyone may have. Thanks.